Ladies and gentlemen, I bring you Survivorman, a cinematographer, a filmmaker, a singer, a songwriter, a storyteller, Canadian royalty, Les Stroud. Les, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
So we find you in Oregon right now, do we?
Yeah, I'm in Oregon and back in Canada in a day or two, and I'm just working with true Canadian royalty. I'm working with a fellow named Bruce Cockburn.
Oh yeah,
on a new documentary film that I'm producing. So,
well, that's amazing. What's the documentary about?
This is it's a feature-length documentary film about it's a dark subject matter. It's about a school shooting that took place up in Canada. We have them up there too. 4 people were killed, 7 people injured by a kid who went in with a gun, and so it's a bit of a story about taking some of the victims, that is, other students that were in the school, out on a sort of a healing canoe trip.
Where's the canoe trip?
Far northern Canada, northern Saskatchewan.
What, the Churchill River area?
No, the town of La Loche, Saskatchewan.
Yeah. I actually taught canoeing in La Loche. It's a tough town.
Yeah, well, and they had the school shooting there, so that
was after my time.
Had contacted me and said, the boys are all really big fans of your show, and we're doing this sort of healing canoe trip. Would you be interested in coming, and could you film it? And it worked out that just everything just seemed to work out that I could do the trip, and so I went out and. It was a very, very powerful experience, and it did result in actually a feature-length documentary film. So I'm working with Bruce Cockburn on the music. Robbie Robertson has committed some material, and we'll be, submitting to the usual suspects in terms of festivals very soon.
Well, that's not your only brush with Canadian music royalty, of which you are becoming a member. You shared a studio space with the Tragically Hip back in the day, didn't you?
Wow, yeah, it goes way back. Yeah, that was before they were the Tragically. I mean, they were named the Tragically Hip, but before they'd made it. I remember listening to little cassette demos that the guitar player would let me hear.
For the younger crowd, we might need to clarify what a cassette is.
Yeah, no kidding, eh? That's long before downloadables and MP3s and files and before CDs even. So yeah, we get these little cassette tapes, and I'd listen to their music, and they had one side of the rehearsal space, the Tragically Hip, and my band had the other side.
Oh, that'd be amazing. The latest album you've done there, Bittern Lake, I mean, it really seems like you're playing in the blues/folk rock genre. It's hard to classify you exactly.
It's nice to not be classified because, of course, it's heavily influenced, nonetheless. And what's it influenced by? It's influenced by, the last 35 years of listening to all kinds of music. And I grew up in the classic rock era, mind you, but, blues, classicals, Spanish, onwards through, even today's hip hop, anything is an influence to me. And so I like to try to get it all to come out. I mean, that said, once you sit down with a guitar, your fingers are going to do things in the way that you're used to doing them. And so you do end up at a sound, but certainly I'm influenced by Americana, blues rock, roots rock, folk rock, blues, jazz even, when I start to write.
Yeah. I've not seen you live, but I've seen recordings of your live performances, and it's interesting how you mix the video with the audio, with the storytelling. It's much more than just a concert per se.
Yeah, well, and that's always been me. I very much have always valued entertainment and strong entertainers when they're on stage. I mean, from recognizing the brilliance of a Michael Jackson to the genius of a Fred Astaire, Gene Kelly, to even the absolute sort of quintessentialness, if that's a word, of the rock frontman of someone like a David Lee Roth. I mean, entertainment is important to me, and valuing that you have people in a theater for a couple of hours and they paid money to be there. You want to bring it, and that doesn't mean that there's not room for the quiet, intimate settings, just playing the music. Willie Nelson was always fond of saying, I don't talk much, I just play the music. People want that the most. But for me, let's face it, I'm a filmmaker. Mm-hmm. So it's no stretch to think, well, okay, when you come to my show, I'm going to incorporate film. And I'm going to do it in a way that I think is much more potent than, the average rock band that throws up a bunch of images behind them on a screen, kind of like they get some guy to do it because they don't really know video. Well, me, I'm it's intertwined for me, the whole video and music. And so, yeah, I do a lot of shows without the video too. And I love the intimate performances, everything from solo on up to the full rock band. But when I can do the full show with the big video screens and show all these wilderness images and play my music, which is always a message of, all of my music is about celebrating nature, connecting to the earth, then I have sort of the full fruition of everything that I've worked on and tried to bring to the stage.
Did you do all your own video that's being projected behind you?
Yeah, pretty much. Okay. I mean, certainly with my editor, Barry Farrell, I've worked with for a long time. I work with my team. It's my work,
okay.
And that's
some amazing images. It's not just you eating bugs. It's amazing places all around the world.
I've been filming, more than just the survival for years. I mean, definitely there is some stock footage that comes into play because, but the beauty of that is because I'm a film producer, I have access to, material that is not just what you can buy, if you go to subscribe to some, thing like it's called like Art Beats or something like that. Instead of going to one of those platforms, I mean, I have access to footage that is more the kind of stuff that National Geographic or Discovery Channel would have access to.
Right.
So, and I blend that all in. I have a sensibility that focuses me in on the wildlife and on nature. Mm-hmm. And that's the important thing, right? I mean, when people come for my music, I'm fond of joking around that, hey, man, I'm over 50. You don't want to hear my love songs. But I do, of course, write them too. But I'm focusing what I'm doing musically on the same thing I focus for Survivorman, and that is on an idealism or on an agenda and an intent to get you back out in nature. And so my concerts are focused that way too. And it's not a stretch, it's a natural for Les Stroud to be writing and presenting material that is celebrating nature, as it was with Survivorman.
Absolutely. No, I mean, I remember some harmonica sequences back in the Survivorman days. Did you?
Yeah, when I would blow harp on the shows, part of that was for just the fun and just because I could, but it was also a little bit of me sort of saying, hey, look, I'm not just a one-trick pony here. I don't just do firebows and make shelters. I've got, a lot more to my existence as an artist. Mm-hmm. And so whether it's writing, I just recently written a children's story, for example, a fiction children's story, or whether it's creating what I hope were perceived as beautiful films when I would make a Survivorman episode. I was never making a TV show. Oh, let's go out and crank out a TV series. I was creating individual one-off 1 hour films in my head. That's what I was doing. It had to be art, and the music is the same. So I endeavor to be a very prolific, very productive artist, and that's why I'm not unfocused. No, I just go in these different directions when the muse strikes.
This takes us to the actual filmmaking while you're doing your survival stuff. It's difficult enough to do the survival stuff, but now you've talked about setting up a camera, going ahead, setting up a camera, walking across the landscape, going back and getting the camera, and then not having the shot and having to do it again. Would you have an estimate as to how much more difficult it was to do the survival stuff while trying to film the survival stuff?
Yeah, my estimate would be it's twice as hard. That's the tricky reality. My story. The story of the survival genre. I mean, Survivorman Reigns is still the only show that actually, did it for real. Everything else has been a crafted, scripted, produced, and faked, mostly faked endeavor to do what Survivorman did. But the reason why this filmmaking side of it made it actually, well, look, it was always like this. If I'm going out to survive for 7 days as Survivorman, the artificial part of that is I know I'm going out. The artificial part is I know I'm coming back. The artificial part is I'm there to also make a film. So how can I, I always felt that in a weird way that because I burdened myself with being completely alone and having to film everything, that almost nullified or accounted for an offset the fact that, well, I know I'm doing this. It wasn't really a survival. It wasn't really an accident. I'm putting myself in this place. And so I kind of enjoyed that fact that, well, Well, psychologically, I had the advantage of knowing I was doing this on purpose. Physically, I had the disadvantage of, well, I got to film everything. And what would that mean? How does that play out? What it would mean is, bottom line is, my shelters always sucked. And they sucked because it takes a long time and a lot of effort to make a good shelter. Now try filming it at the same time.
Right.
I would run out of time to really get a good shelter made. And I would run out of time to really fish well or hunt well, which was a byproduct of having to film it. So it was kind of cool. I always felt, well, I have the advantage psychologically, but I have the disadvantage physically because I have to film it.
And maybe they equal out.
I was just going to say the second part of this equation is I filmed it well because I wanted to be a proper filmmaker, a proper artist creating beautiful films you can watch.
Yeah. Well, I think you certainly succeeded. I mean, the longevity of that series is a testament to how well it was done.
It's almost 18 years, and it's still, even though I haven't made a new one in a while, they still run marathons of Survivorman on given weekends, which, what does that mean? It means they're making money. Me, but they're making money, and they wouldn't be making money if people weren't watching it. So it's 17, 18 years later. They're still running marathons from season one.
Mm-hmm. Well, a couple of technical questions. Just I really want to get into the weeds about some of the survival thing. And the first is, some of the people doing the longer treks up north or the transantarctic treks, they'll deliberately do things like put on a ton of weight to feed themselves. It's much easier to carry fat in your belly than it is to carry fat in your sled. Did you ever do much physical preparation, or were you just not out long enough to make that make sense?
Zero. And I'll tell you why. And it goes right back to the discussion we were just having. If I prepped, in my brain, that was a form of cheating. Because it's like, well, I know I'm going to do this thing next week. I better start eating the pasta. That's cheating. So I don't want the extra weight. If I underate to make my stomach smaller so it wouldn't be as painful when it's out there, that's cheating. So again, we know I'm going out. I know I'm going out to do this, but I wanted as much realism injected into what I had to experience out there for you to see on camera. If I prepped ahead of time, that's not realistic. You don't know you're going to get into a survival situation. So if you forgot to eat that morning and then you get lost on a hike, tough. You're on a hike and you didn't eat that morning. If you happen to have had a really big breakfast, you get lost on a hike. Okay, well, you got a little advantage there. At least you just ate a big breakfast. So let's try to figure out being lost now. So that's why I would definitely not prep ahead of time. And on the same philosophy, often I loved it if there was a new survival skill that I was not good at. So I'm good at the firebow.
Sure.
Great. And I was good at the firebow years before doing it. Okay. I can't avoid that. But there's lots of skills I wouldn't be good at or I'd never done. I would purposely not do them before a Survivorman episode, so you got to see me doing something for the first time. That's a lot more realistic than saying, well, just do a firebow if you get lost. Like, easy for you to say. You've been doing them for 20 years. So, and I wouldn't say that. I would always say, look, I got this firebow going in 20 minutes. You have to understand, I'm good at it. Mm-hmm. And so I love to always inject the reality into what I was about to do, including not prepping by eating big.
Sure. You mentioned getting lost, and that was an aspect of Survivorman. I mean, you did a lot of survival on Survivorman. I don't recall that much navigation per se. And
there was some here and there. Two reasons for that. Technically, very difficult to film myself and film a good show for you if I'm on the move all the time. Here's how I reasoned it. What you end up getting, and I know I've interrupted you, but I'll just address this. What you'll end up getting is a show of less hiking through the bush. Well, that's what they ended up doing a lot with Man vs. Wild. Why? Because then you can play faster music and the show moves faster and it feels more exciting. But what's he actually teaching? Nothing. Mm-hmm. So I avoided a lot of the travel. Also, you don't travel a lot in a survival situation. Those times happen, and I did do some shows with it. It's brutal. It's really brutal to be having to cover miles across a mountain stretch and surviving at the same time. So a lot of times you try to find a place to be found. And, yeah, that's why I didn't do a lot of travel.
Yeah, it wasn't called Traveler Man. It was called Survivorman.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I've traveled in the Canadian North and pulled into a lake, and it's like a fractal octopus, and it might be 10 kilometers across, but there's probably 200 kilometers of shoreline. And you just are filled with respect for the native people, or the first explorers came through there. Maybe they had a compass, maybe not. And, okay, find the outlet for this river. Find the outlet of this lake. go? I mean, it's not just as simple as looking on your map, having your compass, and finding the outlet. It's a long and tortuous search on a very flat land. So I think the navigation skills, especially without modern, GPS or compasses even, just takes it to a whole nother level.
Yeah, well, and the thing is, but what you're reflecting upon is also, and no offense to you, but you're reflecting upon it with your eyes, and you don't live out there.
Sure.
If you did nothing but live in nature, you really do become attuned to what you're looking at. I'm looking across at a valley right now. It's quite beautiful. You start to notice by where the mist is. You notice the lay of the land, even if it's a flattish land, the cloud covers and so actually you are a lot better at figuring out which outlet you need to paddle towards than when you and I leave from our city, wherever it is we might live, and we drive and we get in a float plane and we drop our canoes in and we start paddling. Our eyes are coming from Toronto, Ontario. They're not 32 years of growing up as a child in the wilderness. So there's a difference, that those of us who are not raised in the wilderness, which is all of us, in terms of how our eyes see nature. So when you reflected upon, those who lived there, the traditional peoples, they had an advantage. That's all they ever saw.
Well, I suppose I'm lumping two things, which is unfair. I'm lumping the first explorers, who were probably pretty good, the Tyrrells of the world, who were probably pretty good in the bush, undoubtedly pretty good in the bush, and the people who were born there, who not only had lived there the whole life, but also had the cultural knowledge of having traveled this route to the Barren Lands every year for, since they were a baby, to follow the caribou.
And it's also a schedule. The Aboriginal peoples only had a schedule based on weather and where the subsistence was, where the wildlife were, where the fish were, and they more or less casually followed that because they were in rhythm. The explorers had less than that. They had more, well, they've got to get this. They've got to get their pelts. They've got to, make this connection. But they had still a pretty wide open schedule, but they had to be worried about winter coming in. You and I, we have 2 weeks.
Yeah. Got to get back to the real world. Which brings me to, how on earth did you balance filming all these episodes where presumably there'd be a week of prep or so, then a week of survival, and then travel in between, and managing? I mean, I know you're a father as well. So how did you, and this is relevant a lot to my audience because they're trying to balance, doing strenuous things. They're trying to train in jiu-jitsu. They're trying to stay at a high level of fitness, and they're trying to, and work, and a lot of them are parents. And how did you balance all that? I think there's people without kids and people with kids. There's a big dividing line in life, and people without kids who say they're busy have no idea.
It's very true. Tangent story, as I would say, I was giving advice actually recently to someone about to do a canoe trip. And I said, look, it doesn't matter how much skill or experience you have traveling in the wilderness. You could be, as I was, a professional guide for many years. The second you bring a child into the situation, double your time. Just double it. It's going to take us 5 days, 10 days. Mm-hmm. Oh, we're going to do that for a week, 2 weeks. You have to double. It takes twice as long to do anything. Got 2 kids? Add a little bit more again.
But you didn't take them with you in your filming, except for recently, obviously.
Well, no, and I mean, but I took them with them, and certainly went lots of family outings. Well, your question was about balance. It's an interesting question, isn't it? My knee-jerk answer kind of wants to be, you can't. There isn't one. There isn't. I don't know that there is a balance to be had, especially if you are driven, if you are ambitious, if you want to accomplish. I have a weird methodology of, I get a lot of opportunities. When I was younger and didn't get a lot of opportunities, I invented them. I made them. Then I started to get them, presented to me. I say yes to almost everything. Well, aren't you going to run into trouble in August when you've said yes to all these things? No. I'm not a gambler, but this is the one time in life I gamble because it's almost guaranteed somebody's going to cancel out. Something's going to cancel. This is all the time. And so then I've said yes, and I've been able to go after, once in a while, every couple of years, I'll be like, I'm so double booked, this is horrible. But most of the time, people cancel things, and things change, and And so is that a balance, or am I gambling? I'm gambling. It's not a balance at all. So, I mean, I want to give you, sage wisdom and advice on how to balance a life where you're driving after things. And my advice would be, don't seek the balance, because I don't think it exists. I think you have to get up in the morning. I think you have to not be lazy. I think you have to suck it up and go after a lot of things. And along the way, you'll have to make some painful decisions. I mean, my marriage broke up along the way. I could argue that there was certainly personality reasons for that, and love and relationship reasons, absolutely, that have nothing to do with my career. But I could certainly also say that at least a slice of my career contributed to it, the breakup. But I made a choice. I made a difficult choice, and my choice on occasion was in favor of my career over, say, our relationship. Still is, in various ways. But does this mean that I'm not close with my kids? I'm very close with my daughter, and my son and I are super close. I love them to death, and I go off diving with my daughter and my son, and hiking with them, and I'm talking to them all the time. So even in spite of a life that has its challenges personally, challenged by trying to seek a balance, I realize there is no balance. So this leads to a different thing that I think in life. There are kind of three ways to focus yourself. You either live selfishly, which I think we all need to do from time to time. So a kid in university is living selfishly. Why? Because he needs or she needs to focus on their growing of themselves and their learning. Say you're training in martial arts and you want to get to a certain level. You're being selfish. Yeah. You're focusing on yourself to get there, and you need to. You must be selfish to get there. So you're sacrificing other things to be selfish to train. Because I train. My son trains in Muay Thai.
Okay.
And then there's another time of life where you need to realize, okay, I've been selfish. I've gotten to a certain level. I need to engage with society. So now there's two things there to go by, and that is, are you going to live based on your community involvement or world engagement? I think I think it's wrong for an individual to just live selfishly their whole life, and that's it. You hear about the eternal student. Oh, she's an eternal student. She's going to be school. Well, how about you stop being a student and start contributing to society and engage in life for the rest of us, and give us of herself for a while. So I think that at some point the selfishness stops. But that can be extrapolated down to the day. I'm selfish when I train in the morning. I have a yoga weight training kind of thing I do every morning, and I'm being selfish for an hour and a half, but only for that hour and a half. And then I go back to doing things that contribute, and I feel better for it. Again, periods of life, 4 months of university, 6 months of a certain training, whatever. Then you need to make a decision. Are you going to contribute to I'm really going off on this on you here, but are you going to contribute to community, or are you going to contribute globally? Clearly, I've made it my goal in life to contribute globally.
Yes.
Why? That it's just my thing. I've learned that my psyche doesn't work contributing in terms of to community. But God bless those people who do. The soccer dads, the moms who start something at a community center, the people who go out and do the garbage pickup on a given weekend to clean up a river. All of that, I think, is vital. And I'm not built that way. Though I was at all of my kids' hockey games and soccer games, nonetheless, because I was a father. I even coached the team for a while, so I did give that way. But I always default back to, I want to create films. I want to do things, John Lennon said, I want to reach 10 million people, not 10 people. And I get it. I understand that psyche. And that's not being, that's not an ego. That's just our psyche, our makeup.
It's also your skill set. You have the skills to leverage yourself, whereas somebody whose skills are to coach a hockey team or might
need them.
Yeah, might be able to help 10 people one-on-one. You can help and influence way more people by leveraging your filmmaking and your musical skills.
Well, and it's not about numbers either. It's not a numbers game. It's just what we're good at. It's what we do. People go, how do you get up on stage like that? And I jammed with Journey to 45,000 people the other way. I just feel good. I feel comfortable. It doesn't scare me. I don't know why. It's not. I'm not any better than anybody. It's just that's a party trick, right? But back to your whole thing. So we'll close that off by saying again, I would encourage people to not fret the fact that I don't think there is balance. I think not if you're engaged in life, not if you're trying to be effective, not if you're trying to accomplish and you want to do things. Is somebody balanced because they sit at home and do nothing?
I'm balanced because I watched 4 hours of Netflix today. Good for you.
Yeah. I'd rather, I mean, you got to learn how to handle stress. It's just the way it is. I prefer, look, not to go too candid, but one of the reasons why, my marriage failed was I desire people around me who have a real passion for life. And that the passion doesn't come without stress. It really doesn't.
Well, at the very least, you and your ex-wife made a couple of great kids and also produced an amazing honeymoon video, which I saw for the first time a month ago. That's something people should check out.
Well, Snowshoes in Solitude.
Yeah.
And I'm, certainly you don't want any dirty laundry, but I'm fond of saying that, I've never known anyone that could travel through the wilderness like my ex-wife. I mean, she's really she was just tremendous. And so when we endeavored to spend a year in the bush together, there was nobody that I could have done that with other than Sue. And it was a powerful and romantic experience, and I think it was inspirational in many ways.
Did you meet her while you were canoe guiding? I
was a guide. Yep.
Did you guide for Black Feather?
Oh, I guide for a dozen companies, but Black Feather Wilderness Adventures was a long-standing relationship that I think they're just an amazing company, and a few others, and I had my own company as well. Okay.
Yeah, I almost guided for Black Feather, and then I went up to the Yukon instead to do some guiding on the Tatshenshini. So it's a fun lifestyle, but they're make for hungry winters. You work.
Well, this is it. You brought up earlier, and I'm just going to grab my I know I'm messing up your screen, but I'm going to grab my charger so my computer doesn't die on you here. But it's an incredible life. But there's, people end up starting their own companies as guides, as survival guides, or as wilderness guides, because there's no money in not having your own company. No money much in guiding, and then you've got those lean winters. And Snowshoes in Solitude, big part of that was not wanting to come in September. It's like, why do I have to stop? I want to stay out here. And that's why I became a winter guide and a dog sled guide and winter survival and camp. You do all that, and then eventually Sue and I just said, why don't we just spend the whole year out? We got to do a whole year. It led to Snowshoes. I'm right here. I'm just plugging in the computer.
I'll fill the volume. I don't know if you can hear me, but I remember coming back from guiding one year, had a couple of $1,000s in my bank account, and one accidental lane change with my old Chevy van. Bumped into a BMW, put a dent in the fender, and there was my entire summer savings gone. And now it's September, and that safety net that you thought you had, completely gone.
Well, the thing about guiding, outdoor guiding, is that when you're doing it, like I was passionate as a guide, just loved guiding. You don't feel like you feel rich because you're guiding people who make incredible amounts of money, and they're sitting there and they're saying, "Man, I envy you. You get to be out," and you're like, yeah, you should envy me because I live a rich life, man. I just spent the summer on the Nahanni River. It's just, it really is a wonderful, I encourage a lot of university students and that. It's like, you want a summer job? Guide. You don't spend a penny. You get everything because you're out there the whole time. And it's the most amazing vocation.
How did you get into the because guiding is one set of skills. Can you make bannock on a stove? Can you pitch a tent? How did you switch from there into the more survival end of things?
I started guiding wanting to be the best guide in Canada. That was my goal. I wanted to be just like right there, man. And I had a couple of heroes guys I knew, and so I picked and chose my specific outdoor skills that I loved. So whitewater canoeing was very big for me. Sea kayaking, hiking. There was some I didn't do that I didn't want to do. I never rock climbed. And survival. I just looked at survival. It was just another, albeit very core, wilderness skill to enjoy. And it was the first thing I really started doing I just wanted to pretend I was Tarzan, and those skills, I just fell in love with them. And so, yeah, I was guiding as an outdoor adventure guide and teaching survival, wilderness emergency care, search and rescue, and tracking. All those things to me were very, very exciting, and they fed me as a guide. So when I would do something as simple as a flat water canoe trip with a bunch of kids, I had a really great toolkit I could pull from to share the wilderness with them.
Okay. If the time constraints of being Les Stroud weren't there, say you magically had a summer to yourself, what would be your dream trip?
Well, the larger than life trip would be, I really would love to do more. I would love to do Tibet. It's one place I've never been, and I'd love to go and spend a bunch of time in Tibet, in the Himalayas. But the secondary side of that is, I'd go back to canoeing. I started canoeing again after a bunch of years away from it because I was being Survivorman. And I still have too many rivers, not enough time. Yeah. And I've got rivers still on my to-do list. And Hap Wilson and I, who's an incredible long-standing outdoor guide and map maker, and we've talked about hooking up together to go do the mountain river. Right. It's a river I've not done. So I want to, get back out and do the Nahanni again. I miss it. So I would spend a summer canoeing. My son, my daughter, and my partner, and maybe Hap, and I would spend a summer canoeing or Tibet.
Yeah. Now, Hap Wilson has written a whole bunch of books about the sort of obscure canoe routes of Canada, and they're very well done.
Hap's brilliant. Yeah, he's a great lover and passionate man for the environment, and his books are tremendously. They are really the best detailed canoeing maps you can ever read or get. He goes into such great detail, and including grading a rapid and saying note that I was there in May, right. Or note I was there in August, so that he's really detailed. He does great work.
Okay. So I've been trying to argue people into going up into the Canadian North. And what stops them cold is stories of bugs, right? The stories of the insane numbers of black flies or mosquitoes, depending where you are in the north. And to me, it's totally worth it because all those bugs are less people. But it's hard to make that argument. So how did you deal with bugs? And what would you tell to people who are on the fence, they're worried about the bug situation? Because it really is completely insane.
You have to, first of all, filter out those who are just psychotic about it. And don't worry about it. Stay in Toronto. But those who are kind of intrigued but worried, those are the ones that and you have to kind of instill within them a sense of confidence that it is doable to get away from the bugs. And because you're an experienced guide, you have to kind of take on some responsibility there to help them with that. And so what I do is, I just let them know, well, for one thing, I get them a bug jacket. It really is to get them to understand, look, you put a baseball cap on, you keep the screen off your face, you wear a bug jacket, if you're going to use any lotion, if you don't care about DEET, you put some DEET around. If you do care about DEET, there's other alternatives. And after that, we've got a screen tent, we can sit out, and you just kind of give them the confidence to know that the bugs are escapable and that they are also, only they're at their worst at certain times. Mm-hmm. There are times to get it to go up and not have the bugs. You and I both know what it's like to trip in September. Yeah. It's
beautiful. The bugs are all dead, and some of the leaves are changing if you're in an area with deciduous trees, and it's one of the best times to be up there.
Oh, September's my month. I'm flukishly lucky with the Canadian bugs, for sure, especially. And that is that one summer I was guiding and getting bitten and swarmed like always. And all of a sudden I noticed I wasn't getting any bites anymore. I was getting bitten. Don't get me wrong. They were hassling me. I had to wear my bug jacket. But they'd be all over me, black flies and mosquitoes. And I noticed at night, I got nothing. I've become immune. I'm actually immune to the Canadian mosquito. He bites me and he hassles me, but I never get a bump ever at all anymore because I've been bitten so much. And the Ontario blackfly. I do not get bites that last. Very lucky. Horrifying how I had to go through it to get back to that place. I mean, I can tell you times I've almost had to be hospitalized because of blackfly bites. from getting all that poison in your system. And they do take that little chunk out of me, but I just don't get these bumps. But I'm really lucky. But I learned during that process to remain very stoic when I've got teenagers that I'm guiding, because teenagers freak out. If you freak out as a guide in front of teenagers, they take that as license to freak out. So you have to be stoic, and it's hard. But anyway.
What about bugs in Costa Rica or some African jungle? I mean, Canada, you've got black flies and you've got mosquitoes and maybe a horse fly or two or a deer fly. So we're up at 4 flying critters. There are millions of them, but there's only really 3, 4, 5 types that bother you. What about in the jungles of Costa Rica, where there are a million different kinds of critters, each with their own unique pathogens and parasites and side effects? There's
2 points to your question. The first one is, let's say, in terms of being hassled. Pound for pound, moment for moment, I will put the Northern Ontario black flies up against anything on the planet. There is nothing that is a close second are the Arctic mosquitoes, but the Amazon jungle, it ain't got nothing on the Ontario black flies. I've been, ravaged all around the world, but it's the black flies, they're insane. Yeah. So on the hassle basis, if I'm casting my vote, the Ontario black fly, the Quebec black fly, and the Manitoba black fly, it wins, with its almost tie with the Arctic mosquito. But as far as what you might receive as a bite, yeah, the Amazon jungle is a place where, all it takes, though, is you are extremely cautious. You never just sit down. You and I can just sit down on a log on the side of a river in Manitoba. Yeah. You don't do that in the Amazon jungle. You look at the log all around it, and even when you sit down, after about 60 seconds, you're looking again, because everything is poisonous down there. It's just like, good Lord, so many things, have such, the bullet ant being, of course, the worst on the planet in terms of pain.
Have you been bit by a bullet ant or stung?
I have had them all around me. I've picked them up carefully, but I've never been, luckily, never been bitten or stung. It's the most painful sting on the planet.
Okay. Now, I know everybody wants to know, what's the closest call you've ever had? I mean, you've been in accidents in Mongolia, car accidents, you've been chased by panthers. What do you think is the closest call to biting it, to shuffling off this mortal coil in your time in the outdoors?
It's not, it's never as sensationalistic as people want it to be. Chased by a jaguar. Yep. Chased by a bull moose. Yep. Face to face with a cougar in my backyard. 150-pound cougar. Yep. Those are cool to talk about. They give you, like having a scar, you get to brag about them. But
probably hypothermia.
It's hypothermia. Yeah, hypothermia in Norway. That was heat stroke in the Kalahari, but it was the hypothermia in Norway that was a very dangerous place for me to be, and a situation for me to be in, soaked to the skin with both sweat and freezing rain, and night coming in and stuck on the side of a mountain. That was, and I got there because of hubris. I got there because I was like, not a problem. I can do this one, And when you do that kind of overconfident confidence, that's what gets you into trouble. It's that overconfidence, cockiness that will get you into trouble. For me, dealing with hypothermia is still, it's like there's things you can do, but boy, you get caught in hypothermia, it's a trip, and it can knock you down pretty quickly.
Right, which takes us back to one of your core survival skills of building a fire. Have you ever been able to not build a fire? I imagine Norway was such an example.
I failed. Oh, yeah. No, I failed lots of times. And that's one of the things I loved about doing the series, was that I was able to show myself failing. Mm-hmm. So that whole point of trying a skill that I've never tried before on camera while I'm filming it for the show during the week meant that you saw something real. And when I failed, it was real. And it was like, you see, I'm good at this stuff, and I can't make this work. Don't you go thinking that because you've read a book, watched a YouTube video, and watched an episode of Survivorman that you can set up a bow drill or a fire plow or something? Oh, right. When I wrote my manual, Survive, right, is what it's called, I purposely have hardly any edible wild plants in that book. Why? Well, all the books have it. It's because all the books kind of plagiarize off each other over the years, and they just fill up the pages. The reality is, I think you're doing somebody a disservice to do a line drawing of a plant and say, here's a plant you can pick and eat. Well, first of all, where in the world are they? And no, that's not. You need to be out there trained by somebody who can teach you the proper way to recognize an edible wild plant and all these other skills. You can't just watch a Survivorman episode or even have my book and just go out and do it. Courses are where it's at. People teaching you are where it's at.
Have you had people come to you and say, "Thank God for Survivorman, because I drove my car off into a ditch in the Oregon mountains," or we were in a bad situation here, and because of your book, because of your TV show, we made it, or it was at least not absolutely horrendous?
Well, I say so humbly / proudly. Dozens and dozens. People have said on, being interviewed after they were rescued, like, well, I watched this show Survivorman and I remembered that I should do this. And so, yeah, that's been the thrill of the series over the years, has been the pragmatic things people can learn, and that it's actually helped people in real situations. But the more important thing to me is the inspiration that the series has been. 100%. And what I endeavor to do with my music as well is the people who say, you got me through a really rough period of my life. You got me through 8 months on my back in a hospital bed. Those stories mean just as much but more than someone who said, I remembered how to build a shelter because of you, and I was stuck for 5 days on my snowmobile, but I made it out alive. Thank you. Of course, that's very powerful. It's saving a life. But when someone says, I got out of an abusive marriage because of watching your show, I'm not even sure how they make the connection, but they do, and I find that is incredibly meaningful to me.
So as we're wrapping up here, what's next in your filmmaking? Let's go down to the various aspects of the various hats you wear. I mean, you got the filmmaking hat, you've got the musician hat, you do have the Survivorman hat. What's next for you in the filmmaking world?
So I've got a brand new feature-length documentary film, as we said off the top, that's called Lalash, about the school shooting in that area. So this is really me venturing into doing the work I've been doing all along, which is documentary filmmaking, only putting it into the festivals and putting it out theatrically. So that's happening. I just launched a new series on National Geographic in the United States only, called Alaska's Grizzly Gauntlet. That was a one-off deal, 5 shows, it's done. And I'm always entertaining some new offers and things to do some more survival work. SurvivormanTV.com is my own website. It's $3. And it's everything I do is on there. All my shows are on there. Some new Survivorman episodes are on there. So I'm still having fun with it, I'm kind of cherry picking. For the filmmaking, I'm cherry picking things I love to do, including acting. I acted in a horrifyingly bad independent film, but it could be so bad that it's great, kind of film about a Bigfoot thing. And then I've got another one I'm doing soon.
Please tell me you don't believe in Bigfoot.
Yeah, I would never say I believe in Bigfoot.
Okay.
It's a different discussion to have.
He's out near the Antarctic ice wall on the flat Earth somewhere.
Yeah. And then the movie that I did was like a fun B grade, just like comedy, and certainly nothing serious. And then, I continue to write, just written my first fictional children's book. So I'm looking to get that published. So filmmaking wise, it's a matter of cherry picking, the stuff that I really want to, do. I'm in a good position to do that now. And then I'm very focused, of course, on the release of this new album, Bittern Lake. Yes. And the 2 new videos that are out now for How Long, and the cover of also Big Yellow Taxi that I did. And I've got 3 new albums already recorded, about to start getting mixed and mastered. So I'm really, trying to be very prolific and perform as much as I can and keep my life rolling. I
got to say that for Big Yellow Taxi, which you cover in Bittern Lake, I was like, okay, how's he going to do this? I mean, he's many things, but he's no Joni Mitchell.
That's right.
And I thought it was a really good adaptation of it.
Well, and I actually saw a recent review that said that while coming close to Joni's version, it vastly surpassed that of the Counting Crows. And so that was nice to hear, because they just did her version, right? And Joni got back to me and said she loved it. So I'm thrilled. I mean, what I wanted to do was not do the happy jangly guitar. I wanted it to be dark. So I did it with darker, Delta blues slide kind of thing to fit the lyrics.
And then are you touring at all? Do you have an upcoming tour?
I'm playing as much as I can. I've got my Omega Institute in New York State that I do August 24th, which is I take people, and that's it's a very spiritual weekend of getting people to connect to nature. We literally go out into the bush and I show them, methods of meditating and in nature. And I'll do a concert there. And then I believe I've got an Ontario tour coming up in October. I'm going to be like in Midland and different places. And, lesstroud.ca for my tour dates kind of thing.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Is there anything you want to say before you go here? One final message to the people listening to this?
No, I think just to remember that everything that I've done and continue to do is based on a passion for nature. For me, what's most important is get out by a tree. You don't have to go to Peru. You don't have to go where Survivorman goes. You got a tree in the park down the street. Go there first, And so if I can get more people out in nature, that's where I think it starts. We can have long discussions about, mandatory green roofs, mandatory recycling, making garbage illegal, and all that sort of stuff. But I just want people to start by getting them back out in nature. That's where I think it's at, and that's what everything I do musically with this new album. I would love for people to go to Spotify and iTunes and all those places and find Bittern Lake and have a listen and keep watching. I'll keep coming up with new stuff.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, and good luck with all your endeavors.
Okay, no problem. Thank you for the time with it. Hopefully we'll do this again.
Well, that's the end of the podcast, guys. If you want more, go to wherever you get your podcasts from and go through the old episodes. I've talked to a ton of interesting people, and I've had a bunch of epic rants on some topics that might be important to you. So that's how to get more until the next podcast comes along. Take care, and I'll see you on the mats another day.